As you could see, the land has been overgrown, the land use, much of the stuff that's happened here, the root systems and the hard earth, we're really not going to, our investigation will not yield much information here.
Russian records show that Hitler's body was taken 10 miles from Magdeburg and then cremated in front of a morgue. Bellantoni hopes to find cremated bone fragments to corroborate that the skull in Moscow is real. But the location is not marked, and the only clue is an article from a local archive containing a photo of the place.
We're just coming from the archive, and they've led us to this general area of the Soviet camp. Unfortunately, they only have one article that was of use to us, but what is important here is that that article's photograph is helpful in hopefully finding out where on this property the crematory was located. We're going to have to use this photograph like a detective would. I could see a tower, there's a field, and a grove of trees. The tower and field really come into perspective now. The legs on the tower are too wide apart from this perspective compared to what's in the photograph. So we still got to go further, but clearly we're on the right trail. Look at this, a slab. We've got cement slab over here. This is it. This is it. This is the morgue. According to the eyewitness account, Adolf Hitler's final cremation was out here in the front of the morgue, probably about where I'm standing.
Bellantoni begins digging a test pit 10 feet from where the front of the building used to be. He is looking for bone fragments to compare against the skull fragments from Russia.
We're not seeing much for artifacts at this point.
No bone is found, but samples from the different layers of the pit are taken for chemical analysis. Bellantoni has gathered the evidence necessary to test the Russian account of Hitler's death.
Our studies have been basically exploratory, but clearly this has the potential of yielding more information.
Mystery Quest is investigating what happened to Adolf Hitler at the end of World War II. For decades, speculation has raged that Hitler escaped Germany and lived out his days plotting revenge. The Russians, who claim they discovered his body, have changed their account of what happened numerous times. Now, Mystery Quest has been given access to the physical evidence the Russians say proves Hitler did die in his bunker. Dr. Nick Bellantoni is back in the U.S. to test the blood, skull, and soil samples collected from Europe. The science team begins by looking for traces of Hitler's bones from his reported burial site in Germany.
I have a couple of samples from Germany for you. It might be what we're looking for.
But the soil does not reveal any traces of human remains that can be compared against the skull fragments to confirm they are Hitler's. Bellantoni next performs a forensic examination of the high-resolution images he took of the skull. He's noticed something.
Well, upon our return from Russia, one of the things we wanted to do was take a look at our photographs that we have, blow them up, and really see if we can really get some good detail on top of the forensic information we achieved there. A few things that are pretty striking here and actually problematic. One thing we had noticed in Russia and really are highlighted here in these photographs are the sutures are very open. And what the sutures are, if I can use this model, are basically where the various skull plates come together and you get this little jigsaw line where the bones come together. Really what happens basically as you get older, they start obliterating. We know Hitler died at 56 years of age and really quite open for someone of that age bracket. These look very young, like more someone that's 20 to 40 years old.
And there's something even more shocking about this piece of skull.
The other thing that we noted also in Russia and see here very much in these photographs is the thinness of the vault plate. It's rather small, and as a result, it's something we would not expect from an adult male. Usually males are more robust. If the police brought us this, we would have thought it was a woman, to be honest with you.
This could mean that the skull the Russians have held for decades isn't Hitler's at all. The DNA tests on the skull fragments and sofa should prove more definitively whether the skull is Hitler's. Those tests are being conducted at the University of Connecticut Center for Applied Genetics. Director Linda Strasbaugh will oversee the attempt to extract DNA from the samples. It will be difficult due to the age and condition of the samples.
The fragments are badly charred, and this is the forensic scientist or historic DNA scientist's worst nightmare. It's one of the biggest challenges for getting DNA from burnt pieces of bone. The pieces are very small, and we just aren't certain how much luck we're going to have in coaxing DNA out of these samples. We'll be taking extreme caution with these samples. We'll be using full forensic procedures to avoid contamination.
They begin by soaking the samples overnight in a special chemical solution. If the process is successful, the science team will be one step closer to determining whether the skull and sofa fragments really contain Hitler's DNA. The next morning, the team removes the samples from the roller and the bone fragments are ground into a fine powder.
For the bone fragments, we actually powder the bone to make it easier for the solution to get in and lift the DNA out.
To their surprise, the team succeeds in identifying viable DNA in both the skull and sofa samples.
Oh, wow.
We got something.
Looks like we actually got something.
The bone fragment, I'm really surprised at that, and the swab, goodness.
They will now isolate and replicate the DNA through a process called molecular copying. This will give the scientists more material to look at. The analysis will potentially call into question all conventional beliefs about Hitler's death.
Looking at the bones, I thought there was a possibility, but I never really imagined that it really would come out this way. Wow.
Mystery Quest has undertaken an expedition to Eastern Europe to try to determine whether Adolf Hitler died in 1945 or somehow escaped. This man, a former Nazi bodyguard, insists he saw Hitler and Eva Braun dead in a Berlin bunker. This author believes Hitler faked his death and escaped to Argentina. This scientist is testing the only known physical evidence of Hitler's body. In Berlin, Christoph Neubauer is unveiling his animated reconstruction of the bunker. He is using it to test the accuracy of eyewitness Roches Misch. This is the garden of the Reichskanzlei, under which the bunker was located. The upper level is where most of the staff was positioned. Hitler lived one level down. This is the door to his private quarters. Neubauer doubts the claim of Misch that he saw or heard Hitler die.
It appears that in the main bunker, that the engine room was right next to Misch's room. They had the submarine diesel engine running, which is very loud. We have proof that you could not hear this engine running outside the rooms. So there it gives us an indication how protective actually such walls were. There's no way he could have heard anything.
And neither could anyone in the upper bunker, where most of the other eyewitnesses were.
The upper bunker was almost 4 meters apart and also 2 meters higher than actually Hitler's bunker. No way that anybody could have heard anything up there. No way.
The accepted historical report of Hitler's death appears based on unreliable eyewitness evidence. Now, the analysis of the science team will be vital in determining whether the rest of the Russian account is true. Dr. Nick Bellantoni doesn't think the skull the Russians say is Hitler's is really his. He says the areas where the skull plates come together indicate the skull belongs to someone much younger than Hitler would have been at the time of his death, and may even belong to a female. The team was able to extract something called allosomal DNA from the skull and blood evidence. This reveals a person's gender.
In females, there are 2 sex chromosomes of the X variety. A male has 1 X and 1 Y as his sex chromosomes. The red boxes tell us what the computer says is there.
First, the team looks at the DNA results from blood on the sofa.
The blood sample contains predominantly male DNA.
So the blood on the sofa came from a man. But whether it actually belongs to Hitler can't be proven without a DNA sample from a relative. While Hitler has living relatives in the US, they did not respond to inquiries from Mystery Quest. The team turns to the DNA result from the skull.
So that sample, which came from the skull, has only a female signature in it. And so we think that's come from a woman.
So you're saying the bone fragment came
The
from
bone fragment.
a woman, a female.
The skull of a female.
Wow. And you're absolutely positive about this?
As sure as we can be.
Wow.
Mystery Quest has uncovered groundbreaking new evidence that calls into question the historical account of the death of Adolf Hitler. The expedition team, using 3D animation, proved that the eyewitness accounts historians used are unreliable and probably wrong. The science team gained access to the skull Russia has long claimed as definitive proof Hitler did die in his bunker, and discovered it is in fact a woman's.
This is very exciting.
Very exciting.
These astonishing facts may open a whole new